Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales and boundless imagination come to life. Enjoy the story and don't forget to subscribe. The sun hung low over a sprawling countryside garden, casting a golden hue over rows of vibrant flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. Jonas wiped his brow with a calloused hand, satisfied with his work for the day. His weathered face broke into a small smile as he surveyed his garden, a sanctuary he had cultivated over years of quiet solitude. Unbeknownst to him, far above the atmosphere, a sleek silver ship hovered silently against the backdrop of space. Inside its dimly lit control room stood Arilla, her emerald-green skin glowing faintly under the light of holographic monitors. "Prepare for descent," she commanded, her voice steady yet tinged with excitement. Zynik, seated at the engineering console, let out an enthusiastic chirp. "Finally! I've been dying to see what these humans are like up close." Arilla shot him a stern look. "We're not here for sightseeing, Zynik. Our mission is clear: assess Earth's defenses and determine if humanity poses a threat to Minivara." Zynik nodded but couldn't suppress his grin as he activated the ship's cloaking mechanism. Moments later, their craft descended into Jonas's backyard unnoticed. The ship was no larger than a shoebox by human standards but was a marvel of engineering to its occupants. Arilla stepped onto the soft soil of Earth for the first time, her boots sinking slightly into the ground. She was followed closely by Zynik and two other crewmates, each carrying specialized equipment for their reconnaissance mission. "Spread out," Arilla ordered. "Gather samples and data." The team scattered across the garden like ants exploring a picnic blanket. Zynik marveled at a towering sunflower that loomed over him like a skyscraper. "This place is incredible," he exclaimed through his communicator. Arilla ignored his enthusiasm and focused on scanning a patch of soil with her handheld analyzer. The readings were promising. Earth's resources could greatly benefit Minivara if they succeeded in their conquest. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. Arilla looked up, and froze. Jonas had emerged from his cabin carrying a watering can, his massive frame blotting out the sun from their perspective. To him, it was just another evening tending to his plants; to them, it was like witnessing a god striding across their world. "By the stars," Zynik whispered, dropping his scanner. Arilla's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. Back on Minivara, humans had been described as primitive beings, intelligent but ultimately inferior to their own advanced civilization. Yet here stood one before her, impossibly large and utterly oblivious to their presence. "Retreat," she barked into her communicator. The team scrambled back toward their ship as Jonas knelt down nearby to inspect a row of tomatoes. His movements were slow and deliberate but sent tremors through the ground that nearly toppled Zynik. "Commander," he panted once they were safely aboard their craft, "how are we supposed to conquer creatures this size?" Arilla didn't answer immediately. Her hands gripped the edge of her console as she stared out at Jonas watering his plants with serene indifference. "We underestimated them," she admitted finally. "But we can't give up now." Zynik frowned but didn't argue. He knew better than to question Arilla's resolve. As night fell over the garden, casting long shadows across its vibrant foliage, Arilla gathered her team in the ship's briefing room. "We need more data," she said firmly. "If we can find their weaknesses." "They don't have weaknesses," Zynik interrupted, throwing up his hands in frustration. "Look at him. He could crush us without even noticing." Arilla's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you suggesting we abandon our mission?" Zynik hesitated before shaking his head reluctantly. "No, but we need a new plan." The room fell silent as they contemplated their next move. Meanwhile, outside in the cool night air, Jonas sat on his porch sipping tea under a blanket of stars. He had no idea that just meters away from him lay an alien ship filled with tiny invaders plotting his downfall, or that tomorrow would bring an encounter that would change all their lives forever. Inside the cramped confines of the Minivaran ship, tension hung heavy in the air. The initial shock of encountering Jonas had given way to a frantic scramble for a viable strategy. Arella paced back and forth, her emerald eyes scanning the holographic displays. "We need a new approach," she reiterated, her voice strained. "Direct confrontation is out of the question. We're dealing with something far larger than we anticipated." Lyrics, the team strategist, a wizened alien with deep-set eyes, spoke up. "I still maintain that retreat is our best option. We relay what we've observed back to Minivara. We can then reassess." Tyner, a younger warrior with a fiery spirit, slammed his fist on the table. "Retreat? Are you serious? We haven't even tried to fight. We can't just run back home with our tails between our legs. Fight? Against a creature that could accidentally step on us?" Lyrics countered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We're scouts, Tyner, not soldiers. Our mission is to gather information, not to engage in suicidal combat." "But what kind of information are we sending back?" Tyner retorted. "That Earth is inhabited by giants. We need to find a way to neutralize him, to prove that Minivara is still capable of taking this planet." Arella stopped pacing and turned to face them both. "Enough. We are not leaving. Not yet. Lyrics, I need you to analyze Jonas's behavior. Find any patterns, any vulnerabilities." Lyrics sighed but nodded in agreement. "Tyner, focus on defensive measures. If Jonas gets too close, we need to be able to protect the ship." Tyner grinned, his eyes gleaming with determination. "You can count on me, Commander." Meanwhile, Jonas was oblivious to the turmoil he had caused. He woke up with the sunrise, stretched, and headed outside to his garden. As he stepped onto the dew-kissed grass, he unknowingly set off a flurry of activity within the hidden alien ship. "He's moving," Zynik shouted from the observation deck. "He's heading towards the tomato plants again." Arella rushed to the monitor, her heart pounding in her chest. "Everyone, stay calm. This is an opportunity." "Lyrics, what do you see?" Lyrics's fingers danced across his console. "He seems to be following a consistent routine. Watering the plants, checking for pests, predictable." "Predictable is good," Arella said. "We can use that to our advantage." As Jonas watered his tomatoes, Tyner prepared a series of miniature laser tripwires around the ship's perimeter. The lasers were harmless to humans but would trigger an alarm if Jonas got too close. Suddenly, Zynik let out a yelp. "He's changing course. He's heading towards the roses." Arella cursed under her breath. "Adjust the sensors. Tyner, reset the tripwires." The team scrambled to adapt to Jonas's unpredictable movements, but it was like trying to predict the path of a hurricane. Every time they thought they had him figured out, he would do something unexpected. "This is impossible," Zynik cried. "He's completely erratic." "He's not erratic," Lyrics said calmly. "He's simply human. He doesn't adhere to a strict schedule. He does what he feels like doing." Arella realized Lyrics was right. They had been trying to apply logic and strategy to a being who operated on instinct and intuition. It was a humbling realization. Just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, Jonas decided to take a break. He sat down on a nearby bench, directly in the path of their ship, and pulled out a sandwich from his lunch bag. He's eating," Zynik stammered. "Right next to us." Arella held her breath as Jonas unwrapped his sandwich and took a large bite. The sound of his chewing reverberated through the ship, amplifying their anxiety. Suddenly, a crumb fell from his sandwich and landed directly on top of their ship. "We've been hit," Tyner yelled. "Hull breach imminent." Arella felt a surge of panic. "Emergency shields. Evacuate the bridge." The team scrambled to activate the ship's emergency shields as the crumb loomed over them like a colossal boulder. But it was too late. The crumb landed on the ship with a soft thud, causing a dent in its hull. The impact knocked out the shields and sent the crew tumbling to the floor. "Report!" Arilla shouted, struggling to her feet. "Shields down. Navigation offline. We're stuck." Zynik cried. Arilla's heart sank. They were trapped, helpless, and at the mercy of the giant. But then, something unexpected happened. Jonas, having finished his sandwich, stood up and stretched. He glanced down at the ground, his eyes landing on the small, damaged ship. He squinted, trying to get a better look. "Well, now," he muttered to himself. "What's this?" He reached down with his massive hand, and the aliens braced themselves for the end. The shadow of Jonas's hand loomed over the Minivaran ship like an approaching eclipse. Inside, Arilla and her team huddled together, bracing for what they believed was their imminent demise. Tyner gripped his weapon, ready to fight to the bitter end, while Lyrics closed his eyes, resigned to his fate. Zynik whimpered softly, regretting his earlier enthusiasm. Nyla, the young alien biologist, watched Jonas's approaching hand with a strange mix of fear and fascination. She had always been more interested in understanding lifeforms than conquering them, and even in this terrifying moment, she couldn't help but be curious about the giant's intentions. Jonas lowered his hand slowly, his brow furrowed in concentration. He gently scooped up the tiny silver ship, being careful not to crush it. He brought it closer to his face, squinting to get a better look. "Now, how did you get here?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the ship's damaged hull. Inside the ship, Arilla was stunned. Jonas wasn't crushing them. He was examining them. "He's not attacking," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Yet, Tyner growled, his weapon still raised. "Don't let your guard down, Commander." Jonas continued to peer at the ship, turning it over in his hand. He noticed the dent in the hull caused by the sandwich crumb and frowned. "Looks like you've had a bit of a rough landing," he said, completely unaware that he was speaking to the ship's occupants. Nyla couldn't resist any longer. She activated the ship's external communicator and cleared her throat. "Greetings, giant being," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We mean you no harm." Jonas nearly jumped out of his skin. He stared at the ship in his hand, his eyes wide with surprise. Did that thing just talk to me?" he muttered. Arilla, realizing that Nyla had established contact, took over the communication. "Yes, giant being. We are the occupants of this vessel. We come from a distant planet." Jonas was silent for a moment, trying to process what he was hearing. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Little green men. I always knew you were out there." He carefully placed the ship on the palm of his other hand and sat down on the bench, cradling it like a precious jewel. "So, tell me," he said, "what brings you to my garden?" Arilla hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Should she tell him the truth, that they had come to scout Earth for a potential invasion? Or should she try to deceive him? Before she could decide, a loud bark shattered the silence. Buddy, Jonas's golden retriever, came bounding into the garden, his tail wagging furiously. He spotted the strange object in Jonas's hand and barked excitedly, eager to play. "Easy, boy," Jonas said, chuckling. "This isn't a toy." Buddy, however, was not convinced. He jumped up on the bench, trying to snatch the ship from Jonas's hand. "No, Buddy. Down!" Jonas commanded. But Buddy was too excited to listen. He lunged forward, his wet nose nudging the ship. Inside the ship, chaos erupted. The sudden movement sent the crew tumbling again, and the ship's internal lights flickered wildly. "We're under attack!" Tyner yelled. Arilla cursed under her breath. This was a disaster. Jonas finally managed to restrain Buddy, but not before the dog had managed to knock the ship out of his hand. The ship tumbled to the ground and rolled into a patch of tall grass. "Oh, no," Jonas said, his face etched with concern. "Where did it go?" He got down on his hands and knees and began searching for the ship in the grass, his massive hands parting the blades with surprising gentleness. Inside the ship, Arella and her team held their breath, praying that Jonas wouldn't find them. Buddy, however, had no such qualms. He sniffed around the grass, his keen nose quickly locating the ship. He nudged it with his nose, then picked it up in his mouth. "Buddy, no!" Jonas shouted. "Drop it!" Buddy, thinking it was a game, trotted away with the ship in his mouth, his tail wagging triumphantly. Arella closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable. This was it. They were going to be dog toys. The world turned upside down for Arella and her crew as Buddy, the golden retriever, triumphantly paraded around with their ship nestled in his slobbery mouth. The alien crew were tossed and turned inside, the ship's delicate instruments groaning under the strain. "This is it," Lyrics groaned, clutching at a console. "We're going to be chewed to pieces." Tyner, ever the warrior, readied his weapon. "If we're going down, we're taking this mutt with us." Arella, however, was focused on survival. "Hold your fire, Tyner. We need to assess the situation." Outside, Jonas was in a state of mild panic. "Buddy. Bad dog. Drop it. That's not yours." He lumbered after his playful companion, his pleas falling on deaf ears. Buddy, convinced he had found the ultimate chew toy, continued to prance around the garden, occasionally giving the ship a playful toss in the air. Back on the Minivaran mothership, orbiting high above Earth, Captain Virak paced impatiently. He had been monitoring Arella's mission for days, and the lack of progress was beginning to frustrate him. "Report, Arella," he barked into the comm system. "What is the status of your mission? Have you identified any weaknesses in Earth's defenses?" Silence. Virak's emerald skin darkened with anger. "Arella, do you read me? This is Captain Virak. Respond immediately." Still no response. Virak slammed his fist on the console, causing the ship to shudder. "Blast it," he roared. "What is going on down there?" He turned to his communications officer. "Increase the signal strength. I want to know what's happening on that planet." Back on Earth, Arella was desperately trying to regain control of the situation. She managed to override the ship's internal comm system and establish a shaky link with the mothership. "Captain Virak," she said, her voice strained. "This is Arella. We've encountered complications." "Complications?" Virak thundered. "What kind of complications? Are the humans proving more formidable than we anticipated?" Arella hesitated. "It's difficult to explain, Captain. We've encountered a large specimen. A canine." Virak was incredulous. "A canine? What does a canine have to do with anything? Arella, are you telling me that your mission is being thwarted by a dog?" Before Arella could answer, Buddy dropped the ship at Jonas's feet, tail still wagging. He then proceeded to bark at it, urging Jonas to throw it for him. Jonas sighed, picking up the ship carefully. "All right, Buddy, all right. But be gentle." He tossed the ship a short distance, and Buddy bounded after it, retrieving it with glee. Inside the ship, the crew groaned as they were tossed around once more. "Captain," Arella said desperately, "we need assistance. We're in a precarious situation." Virak's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Precarious? Is that what you call being played fetch with by a terrestrial canine? Arella, I'm giving you one more chance. Complete your mission, or face the consequences." The communication line went dead. Arella slumped in her seat, defeated. She knew what Virak meant by consequences. Failure was not an option in Minivaran society. She looked at her crew, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. She knew she had to do something, but she didn't know what. Then, an idea struck her. It was a long shot, but it was the only thing she could think of. "Zynik, can you amplify the external communicator?" she asked. Zynik, bruised but still functional, nodded. "I think so, Commander." "But why?" "We're going to talk to the giant," Erla said. "We're going to try to reason with him." Tyner scoffed. "Reason with him? He's a giant. He won't understand us." "We have to try," Erla said. "It's our only hope." Zynik worked frantically, adjusting the ship's communication systems. Finally, he gave Erla a thumbs up. Erla took a deep breath and activated the external communicator. "Giant being," she said, her voice amplified to a near-deafening level. "We wish to speak with you." Jonas, who was now sitting on the bench watching Buddy play with the ship, nearly jumped out of his skin. He looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. Did that thing just talk to me again?" he muttered. He picked up the ship and held it close to his ear. "Hello," he said tentatively. "Is anyone there?" Erla's heart pounded in her chest. He had heard her. "Yes, giant being," she said. "We are here. We wish to negotiate." Jonas stared at the ship in disbelief. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, he said. "This is going to be interesting." Jonas settled back on the bench, cradling the tiny alien ship in his hand. "All right, little fellas," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. "I'm listening. What do you want to negotiate?" Inside the ship, Erla took a deep breath. This was it. The fate of her crew, and perhaps of Earth itself, rested on her ability to convince this giant of their peaceful intentions. "Giant being," she began, "we are explorers from a distant planet. Our mission was to assess your world for potential colonization." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "Colonization, huh? So, you were planning on taking over?" Erla hesitated. "That was the original plan, yes. But we've reconsidered." "Reconsidered?" Jonas chuckled. "Let me guess, you saw how big I was and decided to pack your bags." "It's not just your size," Erla said, trying to maintain her composure. "We've observed your behavior. Your kindness, your connection to this planet. We realize that Earth is not a world to be conquered. It's a world to be respected." Jonas was silent for a moment, his gaze softening. That's a nice thing to say," he said. "But what about your people? Will they see it that way?" Erla sighed. "That's the problem. My commander, Captain Virak, is not known for his diplomacy. If I return empty-handed, he will likely send a full-scale invasion force." Jonas frowned. "So, what do you want me to do? Fight off an alien invasion?" "No," Erla said quickly. "I don't want violence. I want peace. I want you to help me convince my people that Earth is not a threat." "And how do you propose we do that?" Jonas asked. "I need to send a message to my people," Erla said. "A message that shows them the true nature of humanity. A message of peace and understanding." Jonas thought for a moment, stroking his beard. "I might have an idea," he said. "But it's going to require some trust." Meanwhile, on the Minivaran mothership, Captain Virak was growing increasingly impatient. He hailed Erla again. "Erla, report. What is the status of the negotiations? Have you secured Earth's surrender?" Erla, with Jonas's help, patched the communication line through to the ship. "Captain Virak," she said, "I have an important message for you." Before Virak could respond, Jonas stepped forward, holding a small microphone close to the ship. "Greetings, Minivarans," he boomed, his voice echoing through the ship's speakers. "My name is Jonas, and I'm a resident of planet Earth. I understand you've been considering a visit, and I just wanted to say, welcome. Virak was stunned into silence. Jonas continued, his voice warm and inviting. Now, I know you might have some concerns about us humans. We can be a bit loud and messy sometimes. But deep down, we're a peaceful bunch. We love our planet, and we're always happy to make new friends. He paused, then added with a chuckle, just promise not to step on the tomatoes. On the mothership, the Minivaran crew exchanged bewildered glances. They had expected a fierce declaration of war, not a friendly invitation. Virak finally found his voice. What is the meaning of this, Arila? Have you been compromised? No, Captain, Arila said. I've simply seen the truth. Humanity is not our enemy. They are our potential allies. She turned to Jonas and smiled. Show them, Jonas, she said. Jonas nodded and held up a handful of wildflowers he had picked from his garden. These are flowers, he said. We grow them here on Earth. They're beautiful, aren't they? We share them with each other as a sign of friendship. He carefully placed the flowers on top of the ship, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the ship's metallic surface. I'm sending you these flowers as a gift, he said. A symbol of our goodwill. I hope you'll accept them. On the mothership, Virak stared at the image of the flowers on the screen, his face unreadable. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the Minivaran crew members, a young engineer named Lyra, stepped forward. Captain, she said, I think we should listen to them. I've analyzed their transmissions, and they seem genuine. Perhaps there's another way. Other crew members began to nod in agreement. They had grown weary of war and conquest. They yearned for a future of peace and cooperation. Virak looked around at his crew, his expression softening. He knew he couldn't ignore their wishes. Very well, he said finally. Arila, you have convinced me. We will stand down. A cheer erupted on the mothership. Virak turned back to the screen. Jonas of Earth, he said, we accept your gift. We will return to Minivara and advocate for peace between our two worlds. Jonas smiled. That's all I ask, he said. The Minivaran mothership slowly began to ascend, disappearing into the vastness of space. Arila turned to Jonas, her eyes filled with gratitude. You did it, she said. You saved us all. Jonas shrugged. Just doing my part, he said. Besides, I've always wanted to be a diplomat. In the days that followed, Arila and her crew prepared to return to Minivara. Before leaving, Arila gave Jonas a small device that would allow them to communicate across the vast distances of space. Thank you, Jonas, she said. For everything. You've shown me that even the smallest creatures can make a big difference. Jonas smiled. Anytime, Arila, he said. Just remember to stop by for tea next time you're in the neighborhood. As the Minivaran ship soared into the sky, Jonas watched it disappear, a sense of peace settling over him. He knew that the universe was a vast and mysterious place, filled with wonders beyond his imagination. And he was grateful to have played a small part in bridging the gap between two worlds. Back on Minivara, Arila shared her experiences with her people, advocating for a new era of peace and understanding. The citizens of Minivara, inspired by her stories and Jonas's message of goodwill, embraced the idea of peaceful coexistence. And so, the tiny alien invaders who had once sought to conquer Earth became ambassadors of peace, forever changing the course of history for two worlds. Meanwhile, Jonas continued to tend to his garden, watching the stars with a newfound sense of wonder. He knew that somewhere out there, among the countless galaxies, were other beings, other worlds, waiting to be discovered. And he was ready to welcome them with open arms, a cup of tea, and a handful of wildflowers.